Rob and Katie in the morning.
Hey, happy Monday afternoon, everybody. This is Rob Rodriguez from the Board of America's Keswick, along with Katie Stover from our marketing department. And we're finishing up our current podcast series on Mr. and Mrs. Wrong, relationship killers. What causes relationships to die? And if I haven't started on a sour note before, that's today. But it's important, though, for us to know. So we were talking about things like greed and pride, and today we're going to talk about communication. And so before we get into Proverbs chapter 15, we got to find out what's going on at Keswick. So, Katie, what's going on?
Yeah, so actually tomorrow, June 8th, we have our dinner concert with Dave Boyer. It's going to be our spring dinner concert, and it costs $25. The doors open at 6 o'clock, and the concert starts at 6:30 with dinner, and it's going to be a really good time. And if you would like to come, you can call 1-800-453-7942, and it's not too late to buy your tickets.
Awesome. So there's still seats left. That's good. That's good. All right. So we're going to be getting into Proverbs 15, and then we'll come back and we'll go through some small group questions. All right. So for our concluding message on this topic, we're going to talk about Proverbs 15, and we're going to talk about communication and understanding and relationships and listening. And so the way that we communicate inside of this world matters to God. Communication is this critical skill that God teaches us with humility and gentleness. And so we're supposed to use those two gifts of humility and gentleness in order to bring people to Jesus Christ. So the people we communicate with are just as important as the message we're trying to convey. And I don't know about you, but I have trouble with communication, and I'm a preacher. You know, sometimes I wear my emotions on my sleeve, and I also say things, you know, without thinking sometimes. And I'm sure we're all in the same boat, but it's something that we have to be very careful about. And so when we look at all of the potential relationship killers that we've talked about, when we've looked at greed and pride, we also have to recognize that they have to be managed, they have to be overcome, and they have to be worked through in the context of the relationship that we're talking about. These aren't just some hypothetical things. This is real life. And so this leads us to the third potential relationship killer, which is a big one, and that's communication problems. And so Scripture really is helpful in letting us understand exactly how we work through these things, how we learn how to communicate, how we learn how to listen, how we learn how to engage in difficult situations. And Proverbs 15, which we're about to read, helps us glean wisdom from God and his by gleaning and understanding the contrasting wisdom of a wise man and the foolish notions of the fool. And so it begins first by addressing how we work in communication. So remember, tone is very important in the way that we communicate. And so we're going to see in verse 1, it's not just not just what we say, but how we say it. And that's what matters most a lot of the times. Words can bring forth life, and words can also wound, we're going to find out as well. So what a person says can either bring healing or it can bring harm. And so the teaching that we're going to see in Proverbs 15 affirms that healing words are what brings life to the spirit, but perverse words are what crush the spirit. And so there's some Greek words that we'll look at real quickly, but let's look into Proverbs 15. A gentle answer turns away anger, but a harsh word stirs up wrath. The tongue of the wise makes knowledge attractive, but the mouth of fools blurts out foolishness. The eyes of the Lord are everywhere, observing the wicked and the good. The tongue that heals is a tree of life, but a devious tongue breaks the spirit. A fool despises his father's discipline, but a person who accepts correction is sensible. The house of the righteous has great wealth, but trouble accompanies the income of the wicked. The lips of the wise broadcast knowledge, but not so the heart of fools. The sacrifice of the wicked is detestable to the Lord, but the prayer of the upright is his delight. The Lord detests the way of the wicked, but he loves the one who pursues righteousness. Discipline is harsh for the one who leaves the path, but the one who hates correction will die. Sheol and Abaddon lie open before the Lord. How much more human hearts? A mocker doesn't love one who corrects him. He will not consult the wise. A joyful heart makes a face cheerful, but a sad heart produces a broken spirit. A discerning mind seeks knowledge, but the mouths of fools feeds on foolishness. All the days of the oppressed are miserable, but a cheerful heart has a continual feast. Better a little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure with turmoil. Better a meal of vegetables where there is love than a fattened ox with hatred. A hot-tempered person stirs up conflict, but one slow to anger calms strife. A slacker's way is like a thorny hedge, but the path of the upright is a highway. A wise son brings joys to his father, but a foolish man despises his mother. Foolishness brings joy to one without sense, but a person with understanding walks a straight path. Plans fail when there's no counsel, but with many advisers they succeed. A person takes joy in giving an answer and a timely word. How good that is. For the prudent, the path of life leads upward, so that he may avoid going down to Sheol. The Lord tears apart the house of the proud, but he protects the widow's territory. The Lord detests the plans of the one who is evil, but pleasant words are pure. The one who profits dishonesty troubles his household, but the one who hates bribes will live. The mind of the righteous person thinks before answering, but the mouth of the wicked blurts out evil things. The Lord is far from the wicked, but he hears the prayer of the righteous. Bright eyes cheer the heart, good news strengthens the bones. The one who listens to life-giving rebukes will be at home among the wise. Anyone who ignores discipline despises himself, but whoever listens to correction acquires a good sense. The fear of the Lord is what wisdom teaches, and humility comes before honor. My friends, that's the word of the Lord, and you see the contrast between the wise and the foolish. So there's some Greek words. There's the word iasis, and it's different. The idea of therapy. So it's not just this this very shallow sense. It's deep, the way these things work when we talk the right way, but also contrast when we speak the wrong way. It really can kill somebody. This is the thought that gives us the idea of the tree of life, the source of vitality, the thing that helps people to go forward. Wise people consider what they say before they say it, but a fool doesn't. And if you look at what verse 3 says, God is not absent, but God is aware about the way we treat one another. And, just in my own life, and maybe you can think of examples yourself, when we speak fast, when we're quick to speak and slow to hear instead of what we're supposed to be, which is slow to speak and quick to hear, we really mess up a lot of things. Sometimes when I lash out in anger and frustration, I have to recognize that I'm not just, venting. I could be spewing vile at other people, because communication isn't just what we say, it's how we say it, but also how we actively listen. Remember, communication isn't just the speaking, it's also the receiving of information. So a wise person listens to the instruction, and the wise person is open to correction, but a fool is not. And we know we're doing better when we are able to catch ourselves faster than we did before. And anything we might gain by forcing our own way causes strife. And if we're trying to win, that's how we lose. Because woven throughout the entire proverb is the truth that's summed up at the end when it says that the fear of the Lord, Yahweh, the fear of Yahweh is not just the foundation of a wise life, but it's the entire path to wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the willingness to humble ourselves before God and let God's word guide us. And so the wisdom and the humility that the scripture has should guide us as we communicate with our spouses and our children and our family and our friends and our coworkers and people in church and those who believe differently than we believe, because in a world that's less and less about face-to-face communication and following Matthew 18 and getting things right and having civil discourse, you and I have to speak a better way. We have to speak a better way. So there's this, do you remember the sitcom Friends? They just had a reunion episode on HBO Max. But I was thinking about, there's an episode entitled The One Where Joey Speaks French. And in that episode, Phoebe, who can speak French, tries to teach Joey how to speak French for an audition. And she instructs him over and over to repeat after her. And when he says it very differently the way than Phoebe says it. So after a few tries, she says, that's not quite what I'm saying. And Joey responds, really? It sounds exactly the same to me. And the scene is very relatable because we often say things that one way, but the people that's hearing it is taking it in a completely different way. And communication is about talking, and communication is about listening. And if we do one with the other correctly, we'll grow in understanding. But communication breaks down when we don't realize the different parts of communication. How many times has a friend of ours groaned and said, "Why don't they understand me?" We have to be quick to listen, like James 1:19 says. We have to be slow to speak, and we have to be slow to become angry, because that's how we grow in understanding. So, a few months ago, my family and I went through a huge trial. And a part of the trial was caused by the fact that in my anger and my frustration and what I was doing in my ministry, I began to lash out, and I had a shorter fuse. And what began to happen was that the things that I did very well to make sure I continued to do my ministry, but there were these moments where I was upset and I was sharing with people in confidence how I was feeling. There was a moment that I got to see all of that in front of me in screenshots and in text of like what I actually said. And it broke me down how debilitating I made myself because of bad communication. The world grapples with good communication. How are we with this? In order to save our relationships, in order to save our friendships, in order to save our congregations, in order to save our communities, we have to be willing to do the hard work of learning how to communicate clearly and how to communicate well with one another. And it's not possible for us to do that alone. We have to, like myself, we have to get a counselor or a therapist or a mediator to come in and to give us professional clarity, especially in difficult situations. Because when we shut down, when we blow up, when we start cussing, when we start using vile language and start thinking the worst about people, this is not the healthy way. And this is why we have struggling relationships. And so we need that humility to bring these things down. Two areas stand out as places where believers and non-believers alike find themselves struggling to adequately communicate well. And I think that's got to be social media, and that's got to be political dialogue. It's not always possible to communicate something valuable without offending somebody. And we know that's true, right? So when disagreement gives way to dialogue, what happens? People benefit from that. But when there's this sterile environment that's violated just for the sake of process and progress, that's where the violations come up, and that's where things start to break down. So the birth of us as Christians growing is the cost of us taking risks to make sure that we are being heard correctly, but that we're listening correctly. Remember, sensitivity is something that is immeasurably valuable. I mean, think about this. Sensitive expression is driven by this. And this is something that I'm trying to learn. I still struggle with. Sensitivity is driven by the idea that the people that we're communicating with are as important as what we're trying to communicate. And just because we can offend someone doesn't mean that we should relish that opportunity. But there's another part to that, okay? Sensitive interpretation means that we're willing to overlook an offense to understand the heart of what's being communicated. And so when somebody offends us by what we say, our response should be, okay, why did they say it that way? We can talk about that. But what are they trying to say? Yeah, I'm offended. I'm definitely offended by what they said, but is there any truth in what they're trying to say? So here's my prayer for us as we get through the end of this podcast. And we're going to have one more series before the podcast closes down for the summer. Let's treat people that we're communicating with the importance of the message that we're trying to communicate. What I'm trying to say is important, yes, but the person that you're saying it to is also important. May God help us with this. All right, Zach, that is the last one. So Proverbs 15, we spoke about communication and understanding and relationships, and the way that we communicate in the world and with people matters to God. And so like we've been doing for our entire podcast journey. We've been going through some questions to kind of help us to dig in deeper into what we spoke about. So, Katie, what kind of questions do we have this week?
Okay, so number one, do you have a tendency to explode or to hide when you are upset or passionate about something? How has it gotten you into relational trouble?
Yeah, so I spoke a little bit about this in the Bible study too. So I tend to okay, if I'm nervous about something, I tend to hide. If I'm upset about something or excited about something, I tend to blow up. And I think that could be a cultural thing, but to me that it gets me in trouble though, because it does give me some relationship woes where I'm trying to communicate something that I'm passionate about or defending the whatever stance I'm taking or whatever, and it comes off as being very argumentative from the very beginning. And so this is why I think James says, be quick to hear and slow to speak, because as you're listening, you're going to find the right way to say the next thing you have to say. If so, we talked about this like in Proverbs 15. It's not the most important thing to win the argument. The most important thing is to preserve and to build the relationship. So if we're always lashing out in anger, then we're never going to, we don't get our point across anyway, even though we think we did. The person on the other
Mhm.
side, silence doesn't mean progress. That means breakdown. So
Hmm. So how does our use of texts, emails, and social media get in the way of communicating well? How do we overcome those obstacles?
yeah, and this is the time more like any, at least with like Zoom calls, even though everybody hates them, at least we get to see each other, The problem with
Mhm.
text and social media, I think is twofold. The first one is this, and this is something that you really can't overcome in having, unless you have communication verbally and having facial expressions, is the fact you can't determine tone in a text, and you can't determine
Mhm.
tone in an email, and you can't determine the motivation on social media. And you may say things, that's why people say, why are you using all caps? Why are you yelling at me? Because sometimes people just, that's the way they do it. And I think
Mhm.
some of the ways for us to overcome those things is, especially if you have to, I mean, and I get it. We all use text and messaging because you can read it on your own time, you can respond on your own time, and sometimes you really don't want to have a 20-minute conversation. You just want to have a quick back and forth. And so some of the ways to overcome those in relationships are, if you tend to see that a lot of the relationships that you have is over text, then you should set some time aside to have a face-to-face once in a while, just to make sure that the relationship is good. Like, imagine a dating relationship where all there was text, and they hardly ever met. And the thing is, though, during COVID, that's exactly how some relationships got started. They couldn't meet,
Mhm.
but they met like while they were gaming, or while they were, even in a maybe in a new church small group, but they've never really seen each other. It was just kind of like through Zoom. And you have to get together in order to see how the relationship is gonna proceed. But I think the other thing that we can do to overcome these relationship woes when it comes to text and social media is, check. And it's funny, John Chris, the comedian, says all the time, check your heart. Check your heart. Because it's true. We all do it. We all say something on social media, and we know exactly who we're trying to hit with it, but we try to make it all coy, and we're like Kermit the Frog with a cup of tea, but I'm not supposed to say things like that. We do it. We do it all the time. We know what we're doing. And so you have to check your heart. Why am I about to send this text? Why am I about to do I really need to put this post up?
Mhm.
That's something we have to check for ourselves.
So do you consider yourself a good listener? Why or why not?
What'd you say? I didn't hear you. Sorry. No, I'm not. I'm not. I really, I struggle. I have to actively, um, and this is what helps me. I have to look into people's eyes and nod 3 times, and then in my head, like, go back. Okay, did I hear what they just said? I may have to stop somebody and say, "Hey, can you repeat that?" and apologize for not listening. I used to do this a lot, and it drove my parents bonkers. Like I would just start talking in the middle of a conversation. My youngest does that. She's just like me with that. My youngest is like that. She'll just, and because her brain's moving a whole lot faster, she's like, ba, 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 Mo, it's my turn to speak. Okay, yeah, yeah, sure, whatever. Clean my room. I don't care. Da, ba, ba. Okay. So, Dad, have you seen the latest fidgets? Like that's just how it is. So we have to slow it down, and then we have to be active. So it's the idea of, and I think we've all heard this, being an active listener than being a passive one. And I think that's what James is talking about.
So share a time when a miscommunication led to an unexpected outcome.
Oh, yeah. So I think I can think of 1,000 of them just in a church setting, by the way an email was sent. So what I started doing at the last church that I just finished up serving at, whenever I had to I put an email regarding something with worship, and people took it the wrong way as if I was yelling. It wasn't all caps. It was just an email that came to me from the team. So what I started doing was recording videos and, a little professional kick to it, and then saying, hey guys, I'm doing this so you guys see my face, and so you can hopefully hear my heart as to why I'm saying this, because sometimes it comes off wrong. And so I've done that several times. I've sent people. That's why I think a great app is Marco Polo sometimes, because then at least they can see it, and because it combines the idea of you being able to look at it when you can, but then you also see people's faces. It's not a perfect app, but at least people know, hey, I can sense where he's trying to come from with this. So I think, but I think the bad side of apps like that is that you don't want that to be your main form of communication, because now it's like you never have the spontaneous back and forth. Because remember, out of the abundance of your heart, you speak, the Bible says. So sometimes in order for a relationship to thrive, people need to hear you say the wrong thing so that they can correct you. So your speech can't be completely vile, but our communication shouldn't be completely polished either. So there's that balance that you and I need to figure out. But I think, we've been talking about greed and pride and communication. This is something, it's not rocket science, but it also is not foreign to us. This is real stuff. This is stuff that we go through all the time in our relationships. Being selfish, wanting our way, or the other way to think about it, thinking that we're always right. That's where that pride comes in, And so we always think about relationships about what we can get out of it, And so when the way to curtail those things is good communication, because if communication is good back and forth, right, then it is a give and take, which is exactly where you want to be. So, all right, guys, I'm very thankful that you joined us for this podcast. Next week, we're going to be starting a new one. This will be our last one before the summer really gets going. We've had a great Memorial Day weekend. That went really well, and that usually kicks off the summer. And so we're very thankful that you've tuned in to us and to other podcasts as well. Any comments, anything that you want to add, you can put in the thread, and we'll see you soon. God bless.